may recall yesterday at this time, Fred Fleitz of Lignet joined us, and he said this whole thing about al-Baghdadi, the so-called new caliph, preaching in Mosul at a mosque on Friday, that there were serious questions about that. Well, it turns out now that a spokesperson for the Iraqi Interior Ministry has reportedly told Reuters that the video of the ISIS leader was faked because, as Fred Fleitz mentioned yesterday, al-Baghdadi was injured, perhaps severely, in a battle with the Iraqis. This just part of the subjects we need to tackle as we make way for our daily intelligence briefing. Here to do that briefing from some time on the road internationally, my old House colleague, Pete Hoekstra of Michigan, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, good to see you Skyping in from Washington, D.C. You were great to join us from the road as you were in Europe. Now you're back, and I'm just kind of curious, when you were getting on the plane to come back to the good old US of A, did the TSA have you turn on your cell phone and laptop to let them see that it worked?
Actually, I flew back on July 3. I flew back from Amsterdam. I'll tell you, the process in Amsterdam was no different than what I'd seen in the last, in the previous trips that I've taken in the last 4 or 5 years. The process going through customs in Chicago was seamless, probably the best that I've gone through O'Hare in a number of years. So, when I was reading about, hey, there's more steps in all of this process, I didn't experience any of it, or at least if they did test some of this stuff, they did it without my knowledge and without slowing me down.
So, of course, the talk was, and the big report was, hey, we are concerned about ISIS and other Middle East masterminds coming up with new sophisticated ways to bomb Americans, and that's why there was supposed to be heightened scrutiny. It sounds to me like we get the PR about something or the announcement, but government is moving at a slower pace than advertised. Does it seem that way to you?
It could be. Again, I flew back on Thursday, July 3. They may have implemented some of these things, later over the weekend and those types of things. But I think you're right. The announcement or the PR was coming out as I was traveling back to the States. But, we didn't experience any of it. But we have every reason to be concerned that, these terrorists, that they are looking and continuing working on new technologies. Absolutely.
Well, now that you're back home, you're greeted by yet another crisis, what is transpiring now on our southern border. Marine Corps General John Kelly, in charge of Southern Command, is quoted as saying the existential threat to the United States is on our southern border. Have we neglected what's happening here on our doorstep as we focus on the Middle East and other hot spots?
Well, I think, we've always been concerned about the southern border, whether it is, illegals crossing the border to find prosperity, to find jobs, whether they're coming across that border for to distribute drugs and those types of things, or potentially coming over as terrorists. That has always been the soft underbelly for the United States. And clearly, with the influx of people coming across the border, you can say that it's very, very obvious that we've neglected securing that border against all of those kinds of threats to our economic security and our national security.
Pete, it's been over a decade. You and I were serving in Congress on September 11th, 2001. Now, this inaction to do what's necessary on our southern border, is it the biggest failing in American national security that has happened in recent memory?
Oh, I'm not sure I'd go there. I mean, part of the reason is there's so many to choose from. With a new caliphate being announced in the Middle East as parts of Iraq, Syria, Jordan, in that part of the world, and seeing the disarray in Iraq right now. I mean, that's a huge failure. That's an area where we invested, billions of dollars, thousands of American lives, thousands of Americans who were injured fighting there. I mean, that's a huge debacle. The southern border is a huge debacle. What's happening in Afghanistan right now with this fraudulent election, and with America really having no plan to move forward. Libya, Northern Africa. I mean, let us count the failures and try to pick out which one is the worst. They are all very serious and create an environment where the threat against the homeland continues to grow.
Well, we take a look at this, and the southern border geographically is the closest to us. We understand that, quote, the world is getting smaller, but a lot of these things can be interrelated. And Pete, during some of our previous conversations, you have talked about problems with the growth of ISIS coming across the Iraqi border with Syria, and now ISIS moving through Iraq into Jordan. So border security seems to be something that is a staple militarily, except for whatever reason on our own southern border.
Oh, that's exactly right. If the first thing that you want to do to maintain security is define your borders, secure your borders. And that's not anti-immigration. That's not pro-immigration. It's just common sense. You have to have a system where you control to the greatest extent possible who comes into the country, how they get here, the verification process. It's just plain common sense. And when you've got, a 1,000-mile border where, parts of that border allow anybody to come in, all they need to do is somehow gain access into Central America. And if they get there, there's a reasonable expectation, they can have a reasonable expectation that they can enter into the United States undetected to do whatever mischief or harm that they want.
Border security is national security, but we will shift the scene internationally where we have had quite a presence. Iraq. You heard in the introduction I was talking about our mutual friend Fred Fleitz of Lignet saying yesterday they were getting reports that al-Baghdadi, who showed up in videos and it was said here he is speaking at a mosque in Mosul, that apparently that's not al-Baghdadi. Have you heard anything from U.S. intelligence and this curious appearance of the so-called new caliph?
No, I've not. Fred and I are very good friends. We worked together for years. That was a fairly insightful analysis by Fred, and the resources and the access he had to give you that information and your viewers that information yesterday. It demonstrates the kind of sophistication that we see from these terrorist organizations, that they can put together these videos. They're active on the internet and those types of things, that they can present it, and it takes days for intelligence experts to actually figure out whether it's real or whether it's a fake. And that's very interesting.
Well, something else going on, I guess in the civilian world we'd call it PR. In military and terroristic terms, it's psychological operations to make ISIS seem to be 10 feet tall. A report, I believe in the Daily Telegraph, or one of our newspapers printed by our UK cousins, talking about ISIS kind of becoming the next generation of the Taliban, or an upgraded Taliban. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think that that's not a bad analysis. They clearly they want to establish a caliphate, which is a state where all Muslims can belong. They want to establish and implement strict Sharia law. Those are things that are very close to, the basic tenets of what you have from the Taliban. The other thing is they are active in a more important part of the world. The Taliban has been active in the remote regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan. ISIS is in Syria. They are in Iraq. They are on the, they're threatening to go into Jordan. They have more international fighters, which, allows them perhaps to export this into Europe. And some of their key fighters are Chechens, which is why the Russians are so concerned about this. They may be the Taliban on steroids. They're not 10 feet tall yet, but they're growing in stature.
Pete, you just mentioned the Russians and the Chechens, and we need to go back to Iraq for a second, because we're getting reports not only of Russian aircraft, but perhaps Russian pilots. Meantime, a July 5th report by the Iranian news service says that an Iranian fighter pilot died in Iraq. Do we suddenly see Iranian pilots and Russian pilots flying now in the Iraqi theater?
I wouldn't be at all surprised with those kinds of developments. They see U.S. indecision, U.S. backing away from Iraq, and this is an opportunity for the Russians and the Iranians to grow their influence in the Middle East. And, the Russians are also very concerned about ISIS and these threats. So, the Russians, again, they're being more nimble and more quick. They're seeing an opening, they're seeing an opportunity, and they're taking advantage of it.
Pete Hoekstra, will have to leave it there as always. We thank you for your insights, yet another consequence perhaps of this White House leading from behind. We'd like your comments on this. You just heard from the former Intelligence Committee chairman. What do you think of it? Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. A Newsmax Now update follows this time out as America's Forum continues.